The origins of the vampire legend go back centuries to the dark forests of Transylvania and the pagan beliefs of the Slavic peoples. They are shrouded in mystery since the religious practices of these people were not written down, but we know that vampire folklore dominated the lives of rural peasants and priests during the Middle Ages. In particular, these communities were concerned with death and disease. At a time when medicine was in its infancy and superstition was rife, the idea of the revenant coming back from the grave to wreak revenge on the living was highly potent and struck deep fear into the largely uneducated population of the time. Although Christianity had been introduced into these countries, peasant folklore still retained their pagan beliefs. Among these was the idea that after death, the souls of those who had suffered in life or who had committed crimes were condemned to wander the earth forever alone and shunned by human society. This exclusion from love and life was thought to give the dead a deep resentment of the living, causing their spirits to rise from the grave as vampires.
For cosmetic reasons. We can pierce, tattoo, or remold ourselves with all sorts of modifications. But what happens when body mods and technology align? Where will the bleeding edge of cybernetics take us?
Without these powerful women, good or bad. It's in the edge cases, though, where life too closely imitates art, that things get complicated. Because tucked into the dark corners of history, there are stories of real women with real power who have caused real heart-pounding terror. But 400 years ago, things were different, and it all started with a little girl. When Elizabeth married a young count from a noble family in 1575, the count's family gifted the young couple with an estate of their own. Not that Elizabeth needed charity, far from it. She was born into an influential family who ruled over a part of Hungary called Transylvania, now part of modern-day Romania. Her family had produced knights, judges, and a cardinal in the Catholic Church. Her uncle was even the King of Poland. It was safe to say that Elizabeth had powerful connections. When she and Count Ferenc married in 1575, she was just 14 years old and he was 20. By his own mother's admission, Ferenc wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he sure was athletic, and in the years to come, would develop a reputation as a hero of war. Because her lineage outranked his own, though, she kept her surname rather than taking on that of her husband. As a result, history would forever remember her as Elizabeth Báthory. But it's not because of her name that she's still whispered about. It's because of the things she did. Prior to Elizabeth's wedding, and the time between her engagement and marriage to Ferenc, it was rumored that she had become pregnant as a result of an affair.
One of the most immediate and useful applications of modern cybernetics is the creation of advanced prosthetic limbs, including some designs that are controlled through the mind. It's a breakthrough moment for science, so much so that it's led to predictions that humans will soon opt for limbs like these out of choice. Mechanical arms, or mechanically enhanced arms, could be stronger than what we're used to. They could be custom designed too, giving everyone scope to be as individual as they like. And it could be that they're tweaked and patched to become multifunctional. You might take a true cyberpunk route and install a firearm or some giant swords. Or maybe you'd choose to just have your phone permanently attached so you'd never risk losing it. As with so many cybernetic upgrades, it's all about choice. Another sci-fi style enhancement focuses on our vision, cybernetic eyes. Tech that gives you a heads-up display for your day-to-day life. Again, humans are already experimenting with this sort of thing. The filmmaker and cyberware pioneer Rob Spence, for example, refers to himself as an eyeborg because he has a prosthetic eye that doubles as a camera. There are other optical attachments that already exist too, including ones that can help blind people sense color via sound waves. Devices like Rob Spence's don't yet communicate sensory data to the brain, but work is well underway to make this next step in the future. If we do, it'll be life-changing for anyone visually impaired. But again, it could be that everyone chooses cybernetic eyes once the tech becomes available. Early devices like Google Glass didn't catch on, but if the design's right, then we could soon be getting text messages, emails, and social media notifications directly in front of our eyes. Not to mention the opportunities with maps, entertainment, and dare we say it, advertising, to help you keep tabs on your lifestyle. But if you really want a way to get up close and personal with your biometrics, then embedded biosensors might be more your thing. Another upgrade that some are tipping to be the norm by the end of the century, these are tiny machines under your skin that zoom in on your personal biology. The earliest versions are already capable of tracking your temperature, but future versions are expected to precisely track blood sugar levels and to generally monitor everything, from calorific intake to vitamin deficiencies to hormone levels. With biosensors, we'll all be able to know exactly what's wrong or right with ourselves. Just go to the doctors, upload your vital statistics, and await the verdict. It could revolutionize health by allowing for ultra-early diagnoses. Biosensors aren't the only future solution to disease, however. Nanobots could also prove to be vital tools when it comes to health and medicine. We're now talking digital, artificial technology that's small enough to enter your body and your
Her
bloodstream.
future husband took care of the situation in true 16th century fashion, though. She was moved to a secluded manor house to give birth to the baby, a daughter, it is said, while Ference located the father and punished him. The punishment, it seems, was to have him castrated, and then a pack of dogs was set loose on him, tearing him to pieces. It was very possibly a culturally appropriate thing to do, according to the time and place of the event. Unexpectedly, though, this small bit of torture seemed to intrigue young Elizabeth more than it should have. And some historians think that it was this spark that set something ablaze inside of her, a hunger to punish others, and some say, a thirst for blood. Just 4 years after their wedding, Count Ference was named the chief commander of all Hungarian troops and led them to battle frequently during the course of the 13-year-long war with the Ottoman Empire. And it was while he was gone that Elizabeth took over running the castle and the lands around it. But it was also around that time that rumors began to spread throughout the village near the castle. Today, they sound to us like the setup of a horror film, or maybe the basis of some dark fantasy novel, but in the late 1500s, this was reality, not fiction. The village would receive frequent visits from staff from the castle up on the hill, and these representatives of the Count and Countess would recruit a small number of young women, girls really by today's standard, and take them off to serve in one of many roles in the royal household. is that their daughters never came home. The truth of their disappearance was more horrible than anyone in the village might have imagined. And according to some reports, it all began not long after the Count and Countess were wed in 1575. It was shortly after that, when Ferenc was frequently away at war and Elizabeth was in need of help, that she brought on a small team of personal servants and helpers. It was also reported that they both loved to treat their servants horribly. Maybe it was the couple's aristocratic upbringing, or their privilege left unchecked. What we do know is that it was when Elizabeth hired an older woman named Anna Darvulia that things began to get darker. Anna, according to reputation and testimony in Hungarian court documents, was said to be a witch, but at the very least was known for her violent, almost sadistic nature. And as the months and years went on, Anna became the prime facilitator of Elizabeth's love of torture. One document describes how Elizabeth and Anna would take servant girls outside in the middle of winter and force them to lie naked in the snow. Then they would pour cold water over their bodies and wait for it to freeze on their skin. When they were satisfied that the girls' bodies had become cold enough, they would leave them there to die. In the spring, it was more of the same. Instead of cold fields, though, the girls were brought out in the heat of day, stripped naked against their will, and then covered in honey. Then Elizabeth would watch as insects, drawn by the sweet nectar, would bite and crawl all over the young women. Later, a large room was set up in the lower level of the castle so the torture could be practiced year-round, and it was there the witnesses claimed the Countess would have watched the mouths of servants sewn shut, or sharp instruments forced under their fingernails. And she did it all, it seems, for the pure enjoyment of the experience. In 1604, after a long struggle with an unknown illness, Count Ferenc passed away. Before doing so, he made legal arrangements that the care of his wife and children should fall to Elizabeth's cousin, Georgi Turzo, the Count Palatine of Hungary. He was one of the most powerful men in the kingdom, and to Ferenc it seemed like a wise decision. Elizabeth was also apparently a very lonely person. Years without her husband by her side, of running the castle and surrounding villages on her own, of being the prime figure of authority in a world where few women enjoyed such power. All of it was incredibly isolating to her, which made Ferenc's death that much more difficult to deal with. After nearly 29 years of marriage, she was well and truly alone. The loss reportedly left the Countess deeply depressed and antisocial, and rightly so, but her response was to retreat to her quarters where she stayed in bed for long periods of time. That didn't mean the torture had to stop, though. In fact, her loss and loneliness only seemed to escalate. Elizabeth had begun to believe that human blood could help her remain young and healthy. Maybe it was the recent loss of her husband that forced her to face her own mortality. Perhaps it was a bit of forgotten local folklore. Some have even suggested that she discovered the idea by accident after a particularly bloody torture session. Whatever the reason, she became obsessed with blood. Rather than go out, she had Anna bring servants to her room. There she would cut them, or have portions of their flesh burned with hot metal. It would even bite them on their bodies, sometimes even on their face. But her hunger for violence came with a price, and as a result, these poor young women from the village became scarce. Like an addict, she adapted and started to bring in more and more women of noble birth. After hearing some of the rumors from a member of his royal court,
tells you. The cybernetic dream is that you'll have a whole colony of microscopic robots living inside your body, all remotely programmed to fight off pathogens. It could spell the end of bacterial infections and viruses for good. Some say without even the need for vaccines anymore. Instead, any virus will be instantly wiped out by the programmable, adaptable robots already living inside us, with scientists issuing targeted updates whenever a new disease emerges. It's maybe not surprising then that some believe nanobots could even pave our way to immortality. For many, immortality is the ultimate aim for all cybernetics. This is a field that deals in improving organic bodies, making them less and less vulnerable and unreliable until a future time when perhaps they're invulnerable or even invincible. There could be other ways of achieving this, however, one of which is synthetic muscles. And now we're talking super strength. According to some predictions, synthetic muscles could be installed into anyone in the future to easily increase their strength and power beyond regular human limits. You won't have to work out to improve your body's performance anymore, you'll just need to be fitted with the latest and best muscle pack. And it could be similar for our skeletons too. Doctors already use artificial bones to replace broken or damaged ones, so some see this becoming the norm very soon, as we willingly replace all our at-risk natural bones with unnatural but unbreakable metal ones. But what might you be doing with your new super muscles made of synthetic polymers or your adamantium skeleton? How best to use something like that? Well, one of the main reasons as to why humans can't support wings is that our arm and back muscles are too weak for them. But that wouldn't be the case anymore. We'd now have power enough to flap and gain lift, allowing us to achieve one of the most often wished for superpowers of all, the power of flight. In the modern world, we already have jetpacks, but they're expensive, they use a lot of fuel, and they're just not going to replace cars anytime soon.
the King of Hungary assigned a trusted advisor to investigate the matter, and his choice was, whether a chance or intention, Count Terzo, Elizabeth's cousin and legal caretaker. So in the autumn of 1610, he made his journey to the castle. His arrival was a surprise to Elizabeth and her team of attendants. That might be one of the reasons his investigation was so successful at uncovering the truth. But the Countess might also have just become careless. She had been carrying on her violent, torturous habit for 3 long decades, after all. Whatever the reason, when Terzo arrived, it was immediately clear that something dark had been taking place. And before long, he knew why. What he unearthed, though, was almost beyond belief. Upon his arrival, Terzo assigned 2 notaries to begin gathering evidence to support the claims that the king had heard rumors of for years. But rather than being difficult to find, the witness testimony began to flood in. Maybe the people sensed an end to the Countess's evil reign. Maybe they finally found hope. Whatever the reason, over 300 people stepped forward to offer testimony against her and her team of helpers. And it wasn't just the village commoners who spoke up either. Witnesses included priests and nobles, as well as staff from a number of the Countess's estates. Some spoke of the rumors they heard whispered in the walls of the castle, while others came forward to say that they had witnessed some of Elizabeth's torture sessions firsthand. They described the exposure outdoors, the sharp tools, the hot metal, even the biting. Other servants had only seen the bodies, but they all admitted that the cause of death was always clearly obvious: death by torture. And those bodies began to turn up, too. Some were found in local graveyards, while others were located in various rooms in the castle where they'd been hidden away. Charred human bones were found in a number of the fireplaces, and other remains were unearthed on the castle grounds. While the physical evidence was literally being uncovered, so too was the elaborate network that the Countess used to gather her victims. Most of the testimony pointed to her team of servants, including the alleged witch, Anna Darvulia. Finally, Count Terzo had all the evidence he needed to begin a trial.
Foldable, retractable wings made of some ultralight material would be so much more manageable. They could even come to be totally expected in day-to-day life, as we'd wear them like a backpack and think nothing about casually flying from A to B. But maybe it's actually not your body you most want to upgrade, and you're more interested in unlocking the potential of your mind. If so, there's cybernetics in the pipeline just for you. In some cases, for example, we're already able to interface directly with computers using only our thoughts. But the more commercial applications of tech like this are set to grow and grow. There will be no need for virtual assistants like Siri and Alexa in this future world. You'll just think what you want your smart devices to do, and they'll do it. Total power rests with your brain. Again, it's efficient, but tech like this will also dramatically improve the lives of anyone who's paralyzed, enabling direct control of all devices. Anything which enables thought transference will most likely be something that everyone wants, however, because of the seeming freedom it'll grant us all. Nobody would need to know what you were doing anymore. You could just think it and it would be done. If the popularity of comparatively basic gadgets like Alexa is anything to go by, then this is sure to be a hit. But lastly, maybe even total control via your own brain isn't quite enough. Maybe what you want most of all is another brain, or at least something else to bolster your cognitive potential. And there are various cybernetic enhancements planned which will serve to increase your processing power, including Elon Musk's Neuralink. Imagine a chip in your brain that not only connects you to your devices, but actually renders most of them redundant. Why would you need even artificial eyes, for example? Or a doctor to diagnose the readings from your nanobots if all of that information could just be stored inside your own head instead? Why would you need to transfer your thoughts to another machine if your brain could perform all of the functions of that other machine without it? Any brain tech leading to superintelligence could even eventually pave the way toward totally digitizing human consciousness.
But there were problems from the beginning of that process. For one, Anna apparently died before the trial could start. Rumors swirled around her role in the string of crimes, ranging from chief executioner to witchcraft, and even to Elizabeth's secret lover. She was someone Terzo wanted to arrest more than all the others, but her death made that impossible. So he turned to the remaining team of servants. Along with the Countess herself, this entire group of accomplices was arrested on December 30th of 1609 and then held for trial. In January of 1610, the evidence was presented, testimonies were heard, and cases were made. In the end, the group was charged with the death, the murder by torture, mind you, of roughly 80 servants. Servants who once traveled to the castle with hopes of a better life. Servants who, through no fault of their own, became the object of the Countess's desire. But that's the irony of it all. Elizabeth Bowtry, you see, never went to trial. Because of her high rank and political power, the Countess never stood trial for her crimes. She was the reason for it all. And yet, as each one of her personal attendants were tried and convicted, she remained untouched. Like so many of her other abuses of power over the years, she was immune to the full force of the consequences. Yes, she would be punished, but not to the degree that her helpers were. Each and every one of them was convicted, and in each case they were sentenced to be executed. All except for the Countess. But not before many of them had a chance to speak for themselves. During the trial that built the argument and laid out the crimes, the trial, mind you, that set the number of those tortured to death at a hard-to-fathom 80 human lives, one servant added an intriguing testimony. The servant claimed that she had special access to Elizabeth's quarters, and it was during one recent visit, while her mistress was away, that she discovered a journal that the Countess kept. A private journal, hidden from sight, and because of that, excluded from the evidence presented in the trial. In this journal, the servant girl claimed, was a list. The names, as best as Elizabeth could remember, of each and every victim of her love for torture. It didn't come as a surprise to most of the court that the Countess would do something like that, though. This was a woman who killed for pleasure, who reveled in the bloodshed. Some even claimed that she literally bathed in the blood. No, what was shocking about the journal was the number of entries. Court-supported evidence for 80 or so murders. This servant claimed that the secret journal, which she had seen with her own eyes, exposed the true extent of Elizabeth's evil. According to her, the list had over 650 entries. It seems to me that evil has a way of coming in all shapes and sizes. No matter where we look, there are those who have served to build the legends that we all have come to fear over the centuries. Thankfully, the evil queens of Disney have seemed to live lives that are a lot less bloody than Elizabeth Bowtry, although that's probably not the best place to start. The folktales that inspired many of those movies are almost just as bloody as the Countess herself. In that, she's not alone. There are skeptics, though. Some think that the accusations brought against her were fabricated by powerful relatives in an effort to take her land and wealth. It was established fact that the King of Hungary himself owed the Countess a large sum of money, and many of the key testimonies during the trial came from people with much to gain by her arrest and imprisonment. Even her own cousin, Count Terzo, benefited from her public downfall. Even though she escaped being put on trial and avoided the executioner's axe that awaited her faithful helpers, Elizabeth Bowdre didn't go unpunished. She lived on, and so did her personal quarters, which can still be toured today thanks to some recent restoration work that the castle has undergone. 2 of the 4 towers have crumbled to the ground, and there's no longer a roof protecting the interior from the elements, but you can still walk through the lower level chamber where all the torture was said to have taken place, as well as the wing of the fortress where the Countess lived. In the end, whatever the truth might have been, no victims, 80 or over 600, Elizabeth Bowdre has gone down in history as the Bloody Countess. But her life didn't end with honor and accolades. There was no one to see if her beauty treatments had worked, no one to keep her company, or to endure her torture. No one to talk to at all. Because after the trial, she was placed in her personal quarters, and every single window and door of that room was bricked up, locking her permanently inside. With nothing more than a slot in the door for food, the Bloody Countess lived out the last 4 years of her life in what must have been nothing short of a nightmare to her. Complete and utter isolation.
But it would also take us to a generally higher level, where even many of the cybernetic upgrades in this video would feel outdated and useless. The march of technological progress goes on, and we're always looking for new ways to develop and improve. But in the coming decades more than ever before, the